There's a hearing going on in London this week that is casting new light on the alleged actions of Canada's spy agency. Shamima Begum is trying to regain her British citizenship. She lost that citizenship after traveling to Syria to join ISIS. The man who smuggled her into the country is an ISIS member, later jailed for trafficking. And there are claims that he worked for CSIS as well as an operative. An independent agency in Canada that oversees CSIS is reviewing how it handles human sources. And Ashley Burke is looking into this story for us from London. Ashley.
Well, I just want to start from the beginning of this story. In 2015, there were 3 British teenage girls. They were 15 and 16 years old at the time, and they went missing here in London. There was a huge manhunt for them, and it wasn't until later that UK authorities learned that the teens, including Shamima Begum, flew to Turkey, that they were smuggled across the border to Syria to join ISIS. And there was a book by UK-based author Robert Krbaj that was released in August. It's called The Secret History of the Five Eyes, and it claimed that the ISIS member who smuggled those teens into Syria, that he was also working as an operative for the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. And the book claims that he wanted to start a new life in Canada, that he applied for political asylum in Turkey, and that's how CSIS heard about him and brought him on as an intelligence asset, the book claimed. Now, a security expert and a former senior intelligence officer with CSIS who's following this case closely, she says that operatives with CSIS are not supposed to break the law, and she feels what happened crossed the line. Take a listen.
The buck stops at trafficking minors. So the moment that the source was, with these minors and identified them as minors, and he would have identified that earlier on, given their passport information that was related to him. And so he had every obligation to ensure that they are not trafficked into that territory.
Now, this book went on to say that in 2015, the CSIS operative who was arrested for smuggling and terrorism. But before that news went public and CSIS learned about that, 2 agents involved, they flew to London here to meet with local police who were investigating the disappearance of the teens. And the book said that the CSIS agents didn't apologize for their involvement, but rather that it was, quote, a self-serving meeting. And the book said the CSIS agents were hoping that the police forces here in London would not force CSIS to be questioned or to be held accountable. So there's this allegation of a cover-up. Now, I spoke to a BBC investigative journalist and podcaster who has spoken to Begum. He has traveled to Syria to talk to her at the camp where she's currently detained. And here's what he said about Begum's knowledge of Canada's involvement.
So Shamima was unaware that the man who was moving her was an asset for Canadian intelligence. But what she has said is that she feels it would have been impossible for her, and indeed others like her, to reach Syria without the help of smugglers like Mohammed Rashid.
Now, we've put these claims to CSIS, who says that they wouldn't comment on the case, citing national security reasons.
So what is going on? Thank you for helping us understand that story and the evolution and developments along the line. What is the latest now, both here in Canada and there, Ashley, in the UK?
Well, the UK has stripped Begum of her UK citizenship, and her legal team is now appealing the decision. So that's been playing out in hearings here in London. I attended one of those this week. And Britain's intelligence agency testified that Begum knew what she was doing when she traveled to Syria and that she still poses a national security threat here. But Begum's legal team argued that authorities did little to prevent her from being trafficked. They argue she was sexually exploited, forced to marry an ISIS fighter at the age of 15. And her legal team also wants to know if what UK authorities did in terms of interacting with CSIS and its operative, Mohammed al-Rashid. Now, I spoke to a group of human rights lawyers and advocates here. One of them met with Begum last month, and she said that this potentially could have been prevented, the teens going to Syria. Take a listen.
This was classic trafficking, grooming and trafficking, and we did fail. The British authorities failed, and the Canadian authorities, who were involved through the double agent.
Now, in Canada, what's new is that there's an independent review that's underway by Canada's National Security and Intelligence Review Agency that's going to be looking into how CSIS handles its human sources in light of this. And that's because of a request from the Public Safety Minister in September that was requested by the Prime Minister after he learned about the allegations in the book in August.
Ashley, thank you very much. Ashley Burke, and if you'd like to read more about what CBC News has learned, Ashley has a piece up online for you this morning at CBCNews.ca.